This is a FinalPechaKucha presentation about the rapid growing terror group called ISIS. After viewing the presentation, the audience will be able to identify who ISIS is and what their goals are. The audience will be able to determine why ISIS is considered a legitimate threat to the security of the United States. The presentation includes vocabulary words that will allow the audience to further understand more about ISIS. The words in the presentation are ISIS, Sunni Muslim, Shia Muslim, Caliphate, and Sharia law. With an estimated 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide, it is important to distinguish between the two branches of Islam. Sunni Muslims are the great majority of Muslims. They make up 85 to 95% of those who practice Muslim faith worldwide. Shia Muslims are the minority of those in Islam. The difference between the two is that Sunnis believe Muslim leadership should be chosen by the Prophet Muhammad's community of followers, whereas Shia Muslims believe leadership should stay within the Prophet Muhammad's family. ISIS is an acronym that stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. The roots of ISIS can be traced back to an Iraq faction of the Sunni terrorist organization Al-Qaeda. The leader of the terror group ISIS is Abu Bakr Baghdadi. Baghdadi is a former experienced Iraqi fighter. ISIS is estimated to be between 30,000 to 50,000 strong. Of those estimated numbers, 12,000 are foreigners who traveled to join the ranks of ISIS, with around 100 being identified as American citizens. ISIS currently operates within the countries of Iraq and Syria. The terror group has been able to take over a stretch of land that is roughly 35,000 square miles. A majority of the taken territory is within eastern Syria and northern Iraq. Although Sunni Muslims are the majority worldwide, Shia Muslims are the majority in Iraq and Syria. Because of this, ISIS is seeking to unite all Sunni Muslims in the region. In doing so, ISIS aims to rid the region of Shia Muslims and Christians alike. The ultimate goal of ISIS is to establish an Islamic State across the region. The creation of an Islamic State would place Abu Bakr Baghdadi as its caliphate. A caliphate is a supreme religious and political leader that represents a sovereign state. The Islamic State and caliphate would be governed by Sharia law, outlined by the Quran. Sharia law is the moral and religious law of Islam. The introduction of Sharia law is the long-standing goal for Islamic movements globally, including in Western countries. ISIS is by far the most successful militant group the world has ever seen. You may be asking yourself, who are the enemies of ISIS? For starters, ISIS has many that it considers a threat to its goals. But by far, the United States and its allies are the biggest enemy of ISIS. Outside of the United States and its allies, ISIS also considers all Shia Muslims enemies of the Islamic State, as well as the governments and militaries of Iraq and Syria, not to mention the various groups of Christians, such as the Yazidis, that ISIS persecutes. Beyond ISIS's hatred for their enemies, perhaps the sheer force and brutality that they use is what makes them such a threat. ISIS uses a strategy of playing on the fear of its enemies and victims alike. They accomplish this by publicly displaying mass executions and posting them online. Among mass executions, ISIS also uses mass beheadings, amputations, and crucifixions as methods of warfare. Most recently, ISIS has taken Shia women and children and forced them into sex slavery. The barbaric methods employed by the terror group have elevated ISIS as the most feared organization in the Middle East. In using psychological warfare, the terror group has utilized various social media outlets to publish their horrific crimes and acts. ISIS posts threats to its enemies through Twitter accounts and posts videos of its beheadings and mass executions on YouTube for the world to see. The unique aspect of ISIS is how the terror group funds its operation in the territory grab in Iraq and Syria. Because of its efforts, ISIS has become the richest terror group in the world by amassing an estimated $2 billion as a war chest to fund its illegal operations. ISIS has accumulated much of its war chest through seizures of oil fields and small-scale oil smuggling, allowing the terror group to make millions every single day. Funds are also taken from looting central banks, trafficking weapons, and other criminal activity within the captured territory of Iraq and Syria. Though the jihadist group couldn't last in a fight with a national military such as Iraq's, the threat ISIS poses to the United States comes in different forms other than warfare fought in the Middle East. Recruitment of U.S. citizens to join ISIS through social media has been the most common threat so far. In mid-September, an ISIS spokesman called on all Muslims who support ISIS around the world to act in lone wolf attacks by killing civilians in any country that joined the U.S. coalition against the terror group, including beheading civilians, conducting bombings, attacking military bases, and planting roadside bombs. ISIS is a severe threat to the stability of the Middle East and safety of all U.S. civilians. Protect yourself and those closest to you by doing your own research on the terror group and by contacting your elected representatives to find out what action our government is taking to stop all of the senseless violence, because these barbaric savages must be stopped at all costs.